didn't start with an election. It didn't start with a debate. It started with two governors running two states and daring the country to compare them. California, Florida. One locked down, one reopened. One said he was protecting lives. The other said he was protecting freedom. Gavin Newsom versus Ron DeSantis. Not just a political disagreement, but a rivalry that turned into a national referendum on power, culture, identity, and what America should look like in the 21st century. Because this isn't just about two men. It's about two competing visions of America and a country forced to choose between them. Let's break it all down. To understand how this rivalry exploded, you have to understand who these two men were before they became symbols. Gavin Newsom came up through California's political and cultural machinery. Born in San Francisco in 1967, raised largely by a single mother, Newsom has spoken openly about struggling with dyslexia as a child, learning early how to adapt, improvise, and communicate verbally. Before politics, he built restaurants and wine businesses in San Francisco, supported by wealthy local families whose connections later opened political doors. In the 1990s, he entered city government through appointments. By 1998, he won a seat on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. By 2003, he became mayor of San Francisco, one of the youngest in the city's modern history. Then came the moment that made him nationally famous. In 2004, Newsom directed the city to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples, even though California law at the time did not permit it. Courts halted the move, but the damage, or impact, was done. Supporters saw courage. Critics saw defiance. The nation saw ambition. Newsom became a national figure almost overnight. That reputation followed him as he rose to lieutenant governor, then governor of California, in 2018. He now led the most populous state in the country, the world's fifth largest economy, and the symbolic heart of American liberalism. Across the country, Ron DeSantis took a very different route. Born in Jacksonville, Florida, in 1978, DeSantis followed a resume built on institutions: Yale, Harvard Law, then the U.S. Navy. He served as a Judge Advocate General Officer, including deployment to Iraq as a legal advisor to a Navy SEAL commander. Military service shaped how DeSantis presented himself politically: disciplined, direct, skeptical of bureaucracy, and resistant to elite culture. He entered Congress in 2013, aligning with the Tea Party wing of the Republican Party. In Washington, he became known for aggressive questioning, opposition to federal spending, and sharp rhetoric against what he described as political elites. In 2018, DeSantis ran for governor of Florida. The race was tight, and a late endorsement from President Donald Trump helped push him over the line. When he took office, few outside Florida viewed him as a national figure. That would change fast. March 2020 changed everything. COVID-19 spread rapidly across the United States, and overnight, governors became the most powerful political figures in the country. California moved first. On March 19, 2020, California issued the first statewide stay-at-home order in the nation. Schools closed, businesses shut down, large gatherings were banned, mask guidance followed, daily press conferences followed too, calm, data-driven, and nationally televised. Newsom framed the response as urgent and necessary, emphasizing hospital capacity and public safety. Florida went another direction. After early restrictions, DeSantis pushed to reopen faster than most large states. By May 2020, Florida entered a broad reopening phase. By fall, statewide business restrictions were lifted, and local governments were limited in how aggressively they could enforce mask penalties. DeSantis argued that prolonged shutdowns caused economic harm, learning loss, and mental health damage, especially to working families. Two governors, two philosophies, two messages broadcast nationwide. California emphasized collective responsibility. Florida emphasized individual choice. Supporters of Newsom argued strict measures protected vulnerable populations. Supporters of DeSantis argued freedom and economic survival mattered just as much. The disagreement became impossible to ignore. Cable news framed it relentlessly. Social media amplified it endlessly. And then came the moment that hardened the rivalry. In November 2020, photographs surfaced showing Gavin Newsom dining indoors at the French Laundry, an elite Napa Valley restaurant. At the same time, Californians were being urged to avoid gatherings and limit contact. The backlash was immediate. Newsom apologized publicly, acknowledging the contradiction. But politically, the image became symbolic. For critics, it represented hypocrisy. For supporters, it was a mistake, not a rejection of public health policy. Ron DeSantis seized the moment. In speeches and interviews, he contrasted Florida's reopening with California's restrictions, arguing that ordinary people were being asked to sacrifice while leaders didn't. The rivalry crystallized. Florida became shorthand for reopening. California became shorthand for lockdown. Americans weren't just comparing policies anymore. They were comparing lifestyles. As the pandemic continued, comparisons intensified. California recorded lower death rates early in the pandemic. Florida experienced higher surges later during variant waves. Florida's economy rebounded faster. California California experienced longer school closures and job losses. Between 2020 and 2022, California saw population decline for the first time in its modern history. Florida saw population growth. Each governor highlighted the numbers that supported his case. Newsom emphasized caution and early outcomes. DeSantis emphasized economic recovery and migration. The public didn't experience these numbers neutrally. They absorbed them as stories. Stories about freedom, stories about safety, stories about control, stories about trust. Once people chose a story, every new data point became confirmation. The rivalry stopped being about COVID. It became about identity. By 2021 and 2022, the conflict expanded beyond pandemic response. Education became the next battlefield. Florida passed the Parental Rights in Education law, limiting classroom instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity for younger students. Supporters described it as protecting parental authority. Critics argued it restricted teachers and marginalized LGBTQ+ students. DeSantis defended the law aggressively, framing it as standing up to ideological overreach. Newsom condemned it publicly, positioning California as a counterweight, emphasizing inclusion and institutional protection. Then came Disney. When Disney publicly opposed the Florida law, DeSantis and Florida lawmakers moved to dismantle the company's special governing district near Orlando. Supporters saw accountability. Critics saw retaliation. Newsom jumped in symbolically, inviting Disney to consider California, a gesture that reinforced the rivalry's cultural framing. Immigration followed. In 2022, migrants were transported to Martha's Vineyard through a Florida-funded program. DeSantis defended it as highlighting federal failures. Newsom criticized it sharply, urging federal review and framing it as political theater involving vulnerable people. Every major national issue became a proxy battle. Education, corporate power, immigration, identity. The rivalry wasn't cooling down. It was expanding. When Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022, the divide sharpened further. Florida enacted abortion restrictions. California expanded protections and positioned itself as a refuge. Newsom framed California as defending personal autonomy. DeSantis framed Florida as defending moral boundaries. Crime and homelessness followed. Images of homelessness, drug addiction, and retail theft in California cities circulated widely. Newsom acknowledged the crisis and increased funding for housing and mental health initiatives, emphasizing long-term causes. DeSantis repeatedly cited those images, framing California as a warning about progressive governance. The public didn't debate nuance. They reacted to visuals, and visuals shaped belief. In late 2023, the rivalry reached its most visible moment. Gavin Newsom and Ron DeSantis agreed to debate live on Fox News, moderated by Sean Hannity. Two governors, no election between them, massive symbolism. From the opening moments, the tone was confrontational.
He refuses to take care of the border. He refuses to hold the drug cartels accountable.
DeSantis arrived armed with statistics and printed materials, framing California as declining.
How's that going for you, Ron? You're down 41 points in your own home state.
Newsom countered rapidly, challenging Florida's policies on education, abortion, and governance. They interrupted. They talked over each other. They spoke directly to their bases. Viewers didn't watch to be persuaded. They watched to see their beliefs reflected back at them. Commentary afterwards split predictably. Each side declared victory, but the debate accomplished something else. It cemented the rivalry as national political theater.
I don't like the way you demean people. I don't like the way you demean the LGBTQ community.
By this point, both men were operating beyond their states. DeSantis launched a presidential campaign in 2023, using Florida as his proof of concept. His campaign faced challenges, including Donald Trump's dominance within the Republican Party.
Will you run against the president? And he said, I have no comment.
Newsom did not run. Instead, he increased national appearances, debated DeSantis on Fox News, traveled to conservative states, and positioned himself as a Democratic communicator. One ran and struggled. One waited and gained visibility. The rivalry didn't end. It evolved. This feud isn't really about Gavin Newsom or Ron DeSantis. It's about fear and freedom, control and choice, identity and belonging. People didn't pick sides based on policy white papers. They picked sides based on which vision felt like protection, which leader felt like their voice. California and Florida became symbols, and symbols are powerful. They simplify complexity into belief. So now the question is yours. Which vision do you believe represents the future of America? Which model feels more like freedom, and which feels like control? Newsom's California or DeSantis's Florida? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this quick news cuts deep dive into one of the most defining political rivalries of our time, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on all notifications. Until next time, be safe.